Matthew Clark settled into his armchair, the familiar creak of the leather beneath him a comforting sound amid the ordinary chaos of evening life. The soft glow of the table lamp bathed the room in a warm light, illuminating the stacks of books that crowded the shelves and the faint echoes of laughter drifting from the television. Samantha, his wife, sat across the room, her laughter mingling with the light-hearted banter of the sitcom they often enjoyed together. However, this time, there was something about her laughter that felt off, a hint of something he couldn't quite place. As the credits rolled, Matthew noticed Samantha scrolling through her phone, her eyes sparkling with an enthusiasm that struck him as unusual. It was a fleeting moment, but it ignited a flicker of unease in him. He shook his head, dismissing the feeling. After all, they were happily married, weren't they? But the thought lingered, casting a shadow over the evening. Days rolled by, and the unease blossomed into suspicion. Matthew noticed subtle changes in Samantha's behavior. Her late nights at work became more frequent, her phone seemed to have developed a life of its own, constantly buzzing with notifications. Each ring was a reminder of his growing paranoia, an internal battle between trust and doubt. The more he tried to shake it off, the more pronounced the feeling became. One particular evening, after a long day at work, Matthew returned home to find Samantha unusually cheerful, a hint of wine on her breath. It was a detail that stuck out to him, a beacon of discontent in their once solid marriage. He couldn't shake the discomfort he felt during their last dinner with Ryan Mitchell, her boss. The man had an easy charm, a magnetic presence that seemed to draw Samantha in. Matthew had felt it then, a knot in his stomach that warned him of potential danger, but he had pushed those feelings aside, convinced they were baseless. The tipping point came one morning when Samantha prepared to leave for her yoga class. As she rushed out the door, her phone lay abandoned on the kitchen counter, a tantalizing invitation for Matthew's curiosity. Heart racing, he picked it up, hesitating for a moment. His instincts told him to turn away, to respect her privacy. Yet the gnawing doubt compelled him to delve deeper. Accessing her phone, Matthew's heart pounded in his chest. At first, the messages appeared innocuous, casual exchanges about work and upcoming meetings. But as he scrolled further, the tone shifted. Words of affection slipped through the cracks, revealing a connection between Samantha and Ryan that was far more intimate than he had ever imagined. Each message felt like a dagger to his heart, shattering the trust he had placed in their marriage. Matthew found himself engulfed in a storm of emotions, the initial shock giving way to a simmering anger. Rather than confront Samantha right away, he decided to observe, to gather evidence and understand the full scope of the betrayal. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, he noted the subtle changes in her demeanor. Samantha was becoming more distant, her laughter less genuine, and her once affectionate glances now seemed rehearsed. He took meticulous notes of her interactions, all while grappling with the complexity of his emotions. The sense of betrayal coursed through him like a wildfire, fueling his resolve. He would not confront her until he had all the pieces of the puzzle, until he was ready to unleash his carefully constructed plan for revenge. The night of the gala arrived, a glittering event that Ryan was set to showcase his success. Matthew had orchestrated this moment, collaborating with Grace, Ryan's unsuspecting wife, to execute a plan that would expose Ryan's misdeeds publicly. The thought of the momentous night filled him with a mix of exhilaration and dread. He dressed in his best suit, determined to take control of the situation that had spiraled out of his grasp. As the evening unfolded, Matthew's heart raced with anticipation. He watched as the guests mingled, the air thick with laughter and music. When the moment finally came, and Ryan was arrested in front of the stunned crowd, Matthew felt a rush of satisfaction wash over him. The shock rippled through the room, leaving Samantha isolated in the chaos, her expression a blend of disbelief and horror. Yet as the initial euphoria of his triumph began to settle, Matthew was struck by an unexpected wave of emptiness. The emotional fallout from the arrest left Samantha a shadow of her former self. Her vibrant spirit dulled, replaced by a haunting realization of the consequences of her actions. The victory he had anticipated felt hollow, and the satisfaction he had hoped for began to slip away. In a quiet confrontation that followed, Samantha attempted to justify her actions, her voice laced with regret and longing for understanding. But for Matthew, the damage was irrevocable. He recognized that the foundation of their marriage had crumbled beyond repair. Their conversation became a bittersweet farewell, a symbolic end to what once was, marking the irrevocable changes in both their lives. In the aftermath, Matthew sought solace in the idea of a fresh start. He distanced himself from the remnants of the past, wrestling with the realization that revenge had not brought him the peace he had anticipated. Instead, he found himself drawn to Grace, who shared the scars of betrayal. Their connection deepened, rooted in mutual understanding and healing. As Matthew embarked on this new chapter, he contemplated the lessons learned. Healing would not come from vengeance but from the strength to move forward and rebuild. In embracing new beginnings, he discovered the transformative power of letting go, preparing himself for whatever the future held. As the days unfolded, Matthew's unease morphed into a persistent cloud of suspicion. Each morning, he woke with a nagging feeling that gnawed at his insides. He couldn't quite pinpoint the source of his discomfort, but it lurked in the corners of his mind, whispering warnings that made him question the very fabric of his marriage. Samantha's late nights at work became more frequent, her once predictable schedule now punctuated by an erratic rhythm. The hours stretched longer, leaving Matthew feeling abandoned in their home. He tried to convince himself that it was just the demands of her job, but the more he tried to rationalize it, the more his doubts intensified. Conversations that once flowed easily between them became stilted, and he felt a growing chasm between them. With every late night, Matthew observed Samantha's secretive phone usage. She had taken to keeping her phone close, glancing at it frequently as if it held some vital secret. The sight of her smiling at the screen, a glimmer of excitement dancing in her eyes, ignited an unfamiliar rage within him. Was it possible that she was sharing moments of joy with someone else? The thought was like a thorn embedded deep within his heart, festering and painful. One particular evening, after another long day at work, Matthew returned home to find Samantha in the kitchen, laughter spilling from her lips as she spoke into her phone. He stood in the doorway, caught off guard by the sight. The warmth that usually enveloped him in their home felt distant, replaced by an icy chill that crept through him. Her laughter was vibrant, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it belonged to someone else. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to keep his tone light. Samantha turned, her expression shifting as she quickly ended the call. "Oh, just some friends from yoga," she replied, offering a smile that felt rehearsed. Matthew forced a smile in return, but inside, turmoil churned. Something about her reaction felt off, as if she had been caught in a moment she wasn't supposed to share. In the weeks that followed, Matthew's discomfort escalated. He found himself losing sleep, his mind racing with possibilities. Samantha's late nights turned into weekends spent away, leaving him alone with his spiraling thoughts. He would lie awake, counting the minutes until she returned, his imagination running wild with scenarios that filled him with dread. It was during one of those sleepless nights that the first significant incident occurred. Matthew had decided to surprise Samantha with dinner, hoping to rekindle the warmth of their relationship. He spent hours preparing her favorite meal, setting the table with candles and flowers, envisioning a romantic evening that would erase the growing distance between them. But as the clock ticked closer to dinner time, Samantha texted him, saying she would be late due to an unexpected work meeting. His heart sank, and he felt the familiar wave of disappointment wash over him. This wasn't the first time her work had interfered with their plans, and as he sat alone at the table, the weight of isolation settled heavily on his shoulders. When she finally arrived home, the scent of wine wafted through the air, mingling with the aroma of the dinner he had prepared. Matthew's pulse quickened as he caught sight of her flushed cheeks and slightly unsteady gait. "Did you go out for drinks with your coworkers?" he asked, unable to mask the bitterness in his voice. Samantha's eyes widened, and she hurried to brush off his concerns. "Just a glass or two to celebrate a successful project," she explained, her words lacking the sincerity they once held. As she sat down, Matthew noticed her fidgeting with her phone, scrolling through messages that she seemed desperate to keep hidden. That night, as he lay in bed, Matthew replayed the evening in his mind. The laughter that once echoed in their home felt like a distant memory, replaced by tension and uncertainty. He recalled his discomfort during the dinner with Ryan, the man who held a position of power in Samantha's life. Ryan had an easy charm that set Matthew on edge, an instinctual warning that something about him was too polished, too smooth. The memory of that encounter stung, a reminder of the man who now lingered in the shadows of his marriage. Days turned into weeks, and Matthew's suspicions only deepened. He began to keep a mental log of Samantha's behaviors, noting the subtle changes that fueled his growing paranoia. The warmth of their evenings together faded, replaced by a strained silence that hung in the air like a specter. When they did speak, their conversations felt forced, lacking the spontaneity and intimacy they once shared. One Saturday afternoon, Matthew found himself alone in the living room, absent-mindedly flipping through channels on the television. He caught a glimpse of Samantha's phone sitting on the coffee table, its screen lighting up with a notification. In that moment, a rush of temptation swept over him, urging him to pick it up. He knew it was wrong, but the need for answers overshadowed his moral compass. Before he could second-guess himself, Matthew reached for the phone, his heart racing. It was unlocked, the last message displayed tantalizingly on the screen. The sender was Ryan, a casual greeting that quickly escalated into something more intimate. The words sent a shockwave through him, each line cutting deeper than the last, unraveling the fabric of his trust. As he read, his mind spiraled into chaos, thoughts colliding as the evidence of betrayal became painfully clear. Feeling sick, Matthew placed the phone back down as if it burned him. He couldn't comprehend the reality that was unfolding before him. He had always imagined their love as impenetrable, but now it felt fragile, teetering on the brink of collapse. Each revelation shattered the illusion he had clung to, leaving him grappling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. The discovery of the messages compelled him to confront the truth head-on. Instead of approaching Samantha directly, Matthew decided to bide his time. He would observe, collecting more evidence before confronting her. His resolve hardened. He needed to know just how deep the betrayal ran. As he continued to watch Samantha's interactions with Ryan from the sidelines, a plan began to take shape in his mind, a course of action that would channel his anguish into something more deliberate. And so, the cycle of suspicion continued, each moment intensifying the stakes as Matthew prepared to unravel the layers of deceit that had taken root in their lives. He would not be the passive observer any longer. He was determined to reclaim his narrative, no matter the cost. One fateful morning, as the sun poured through the kitchen window, Matthew prepared himself for yet another day overshadowed by doubt. Samantha had mentioned an early yoga class, her usual routine, but today felt different. She had hurried out the door, leaving behind the familiar scent of her perfume lingering in the air, a reminder of her presence that now felt tainted by suspicion. As he sipped his coffee, Matthew's gaze fell upon her phone resting on the counter, its screen lighting up with an incoming notification. The moment felt charged with potential. His heart raced as he considered the opportunity before him. The device held answers that had eluded him for weeks. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the moral dilemma between respect for her privacy and the desperate need for clarity. Justified by the nagging fear that had consumed him, Matthew reached for the phone, his pulse quickening with each passing second. As he picked it up, the screen displayed an array of notifications, most from contacts he didn't recognize. But at the forefront was a message from Ryan, an innocuous start that quickly escalated. His fingers trembled as he opened the thread, diving into a world that would shatter his perception of their marriage. At first, the exchanges appeared casual, discussing mundane topics about work and upcoming meetings. But as he scrolled further down, his stomach twisted at the subtle shift in tone. Words of affection crept into their conversation, punctuated by heart emojis and flirtatious banter. Each message felt like a knife, cutting deeper into the fabric of his trust. It was clear, Samantha and Ryan shared something more than just a professional relationship. There was an undeniable intimacy woven into their words. Matthew's heart sank as he read line after line, the reality of betrayal crashing over him like a tidal wave. Memories of their life together began to replay in his mind, now tainted by this new understanding. He recalled the time Samantha had laughed at something on her phone, the light in her eyes that he had mistakenly believed was meant for him. The laughter that echoed through their home now felt like a cruel reminder of the distance that had crept between them. The revelation consumed him, every message he read painting a picture of a connection he never could have imagined. The intimate details they shared, the secrets exchanged, each one pulled him deeper into despair. Matthew felt like an outsider in his own life, grappling with the haunting realization that the woman he loved had chosen to confide in another man. His mind raced as he processed the information, struggling to maintain his composure. The coffee mug trembled in his hand, nearly slipping from his grasp. He set it down forcefully, the sound reverberating through the silence of their home. How had it come to this? How had he missed the signs? The questions flooded his mind, but deep down, he knew he had turned a blind eye to the subtle changes, too afraid to confront the truth. As he sat there, anger began to bubble beneath the surface. He felt betrayed, deceived by the very person who had vowed to share her life with him. The hurt morphed into a smoldering rage, fueling a determination to uncover the full extent of this betrayal. He couldn't confront Samantha yet, not when he didn't have all the pieces. Instead, he would gather evidence, collect the threads of their unraveling relationship, and only then would he face her. With a heavy heart, he placed the phone back on the counter, the reality of what he had discovered hanging in the air like a thick fog. Each word from Ryan replayed in his mind, a soundtrack of betrayal that echoed through every corner of his being. The day dragged on, every hour stretching into eternity as Matthew fought to maintain his composure. He spent the rest of the morning in a haze, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of revenge. He had to know how deep the deception ran. The subsequent days were a blur of observations and silent calculations. Matthew watched Samantha closely, studying her every interaction. The once innocent moments became laden with suspicion, every laugh, every shared glance, now tainted by doubt. Matthew felt the tension building inside him, a simmering pot on the brink of boiling over. He noted Samantha's late nights at work, the way she seemed to dance around questions he posed, her evasive answers igniting his anger further. It was as if they were living parallel lives, the once intimate connection between them fraying at the seams. He began to document everything, turning his discomfort into a meticulous record of her behavior. Late nights at the office were now followed by the lingering scent of wine upon her return. He recalled the times he caught her on the phone, her laughter echoing through the house, a sound that once brought him joy now twisted into a painful reminder of her infidelity. He cataloged the moments when she hesitated to share details about her day, the way her phone seemed to become a lifeline that separated them. Matthew's anger transformed into a resolve that he hadn't known he possessed. He was no longer just a passive observer, he was a man on a mission. He would not confront Samantha until he had amassed enough evidence to confront her with the truth. With each passing day, he built his case, plotting the moments that would lead to the inevitable confrontation. As the weekend approached, Matthew found himself at a crossroads, the burden of his knowledge weighing heavily on his shoulders. He felt torn between the desire for retribution and the remnants of the love he had once held for Samantha. Could he truly dismantle the life they had built together? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, but the anger coursing through him pushed him forward. The day of the gala loomed on the horizon, an event that would serve as the backdrop for his reckoning. He was determined to see it through, to expose the truth in the most public way possible. The plan had taken shape in his mind, and he would execute it with precision. As he prepared for the evening, Matthew felt a mix of anticipation and dread. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, reflecting on the man he had become, a man driven by betrayal, fueled by revenge. The face staring back at him was that of a husband scorned, ready to unleash the fury that had been building within. In that moment, he realized that this was not just about Samantha or Ryan, it was about reclaiming his narrative, taking back the power that had been stolen from him. The knowledge of her betrayal had become a catalyst, igniting a fire within him that would not be extinguished until he had confronted the truth and faced the consequences head-on. He would no longer be the victim. He would rise from the ashes of betrayal, ready to embrace whatever came next. Matthew stood at the precipice of a decision that would alter the course of his life. The revelations he had uncovered about Samantha's affair had ignited a spark within him, a determination to reclaim control over his narrative. As the days stretched before him, filled with uncertainty and anger, he knew he had to plan his next steps carefully. The events of the past weeks weighed heavily on his mind, and instead of succumbing to despair, he chose to harness his emotions, channeling them into a strategy for revenge. He found himself drawn to the idea of a calculated confrontation, one that would expose Samantha and Ryan's betrayal not just to him, but to the world around them. The thought of unmasking their deceit filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. He began to observe Samantha more closely, studying her every move as he sought to understand the dynamics of her relationship with Ryan. Matthew noted the subtle changes in her demeanor, the way her laughter came more easily when she was texting or speaking with him. The lightness in her voice was a stark contrast to the tension that now defined their home life. Each moment he witnessed fueled his resolve, making the need for revenge feel inevitable. One evening, Matthew found himself scrolling through social media, hoping to glean more insight into the lives of Samantha and Ryan. He discovered pictures of them together at various events, smiling, laughing, and seemingly living carefree lives while he felt trapped in a web of betrayal. The images ignited a fire within him, transforming his simmering anger into a fierce determination. He decided then that he needed to expose Ryan publicly, to make him face the consequences of his actions and, in doing so, shatter Samantha's world. The gala was approaching, and it would serve as the perfect stage for Matthew's plan. Ryan was set to showcase his accomplishments, drawing attention and admiration from colleagues and acquaintances. It was the ideal opportunity for Matthew to strike. He envisioned the moment when Ryan would stand in the spotlight, only to have that light snuffed out in a dramatic and public arrest. The thought sent chills down his spine, a twisted sense of satisfaction washing over him at the prospect of revenge. To execute his plan, Matthew needed an ally, someone who could help him bring Ryan down without raising suspicion. That ally turned out to be Grace, Ryan's unsuspecting wife. The two had crossed paths at various social functions, and while they had never shared more than pleasantries, Matthew sensed a kindred spirit in her. He understood that she too had been blindsided, albeit by a different facet of betrayal. Approaching her would be a gamble, but the potential reward outweighed the risk. With a mixture of anxiety and determination, Matthew reached out to Grace, inviting her for coffee under the guise of discussing a community project. As they sat in a quiet cafe, he carefully gauged her reactions, looking for signs of discomfort or doubt. He initiated small talk, easing into the conversation with casual remarks about their respective lives and families. Grace seemed warm and receptive, which gave Matthew the confidence he needed to broach the topic of her husband. "Have you noticed any changes in Ryan lately?" he asked, attempting to keep his tone casual. The question hung in the air, charged with unspoken implications. Grace frowned, her brow furrowing as she considered his words. "Now that you mention it, he's been a bit distant. More late nights at work and less time at home," she replied, a hint of concern creeping into her voice. Matthew seized the opportunity, carefully steering the conversation toward the suspicions he had harbored about Ryan's relationship with Samantha. He shared snippets of his observations, framing them as genuine concern for both their marriages. Grace listened intently, her expression shifting as she absorbed the implications of Matthew's words. As he recounted his experiences, he felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was it, he was pulling her into his plan, and the stakes had never been higher. After their meeting, Matthew and Grace began to communicate more regularly. They devised a strategy to ensure that the gala would be the stage for their reckoning. They gathered information about Ryan's recent activities, looking for any misstep that could serve as the foundation for his public downfall. Matthew felt a thrill at the thought of their plan taking shape. It felt as though he was finally reclaiming control. As the gala approached, Matthew immersed himself in the details of the event. He carefully crafted a timeline of the evening, mapping out key moments and interactions that would set the stage for Ryan's arrest. He envisioned the gasps from the crowd, the shock etched on Samantha's face as the reality of her choices unfolded before her. To keep the plan under wraps, Matthew maintained a facade of normalcy around Samantha. He feigned ignorance about her late nights, indulging her as she recounted her days, all the while stewing in his own emotions. It was a delicate dance, one that required precision and restraint. Every interaction with Samantha felt like walking a tightrope, but he was determined not to let her suspect his true intentions. If you find it interesting, please like it. If not, please comment number 1. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. On the night of the gala, Matthew dressed with purpose, his attire carefully chosen to exude confidence. He arrived early to survey the venue, his heart racing as he visualized the chaos that would soon ensue. The opulent surroundings felt foreign, the chandeliers casting shimmering light that only highlighted the darkness of his intentions. He could already picture the guests mingling, the laughter and conversation creating an atmosphere that would soon be shattered. As guests began to arrive, Matthew made a point to engage with a few mutual acquaintances, ensuring that he blended in seamlessly. He spotted Grace across the room, her expression determined as she worked her way through the crowd. They exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them as they prepared for the moment that would set their plan into motion. Matthew's heart pounded in his chest as the evening unfolded. He moved strategically, positioning himself near the entrance where Ryan would soon make his grand entrance. The anticipation hung in the air like static, charged with the energy of unspoken betrayal. He could feel the weight of the night pressing down on him, the culmination of weeks of planning and emotion. Finally, as Ryan made his way through the crowd, Matthew felt the moment had arrived. He exchanged a knowing look with Grace, who stood nearby, her resolve evident. As Ryan began to speak to a small gathering of guests, Matthew took a deep breath, ready to unleash the storm that had been brewing within him. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted. The sound of sirens pierced through the festivities, drawing attention as law enforcement entered the venue. Matthew watched, a mix of satisfaction and exhilaration surging through him, as the crowd gasped in shock. This was the moment he had envisioned, the moment when everything would come crashing down. Ryan's expression shifted from surprise to confusion, his voice faltering as he tried to comprehend the unfolding chaos. Matthew's heart raced as he prepared to confront Samantha with the truth. The sense of power coursed through him, solidifying his resolve as he took a step closer to the impending confrontation that would change everything. The gala shimmered with elegance, an evening designed to celebrate success and achievement, but for Matthew, it was the arena of his carefully plotted revenge. The venue was adorned with glistening chandeliers and vibrant floral arrangements, every corner filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Guests mingled in stylish attire, exchanging pleasantries, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As the event progressed, Matthew felt the familiar knot of tension in his stomach. He was hyper-aware of his surroundings, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. The anticipation was palpable, every moment brought him closer to the confrontation that would change the course of their lives forever. He caught a glimpse of Grace, her expression determined as she navigated through the throng, positioning herself strategically for what lay ahead. Ryan entered the venue, his presence commanding attention. He was clad in a sharp suit, exuding confidence as he made his way through the crowd, greeting colleagues and acquaintances with ease. The sight of him ignited a surge of anger in Matthew. He had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, envisioning Ryan standing at the center of the spotlight only to be yanked away from it in disgrace. As Ryan began to address the guests, Matthew took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment upon him. The anticipation built, and he could sense the eyes of the crowd turning towards Ryan, eager for the night's highlights. It was then that Matthew glanced at Grace, their eyes locking in silent communication. This was the moment they had orchestrated together, and there was no turning back. Without hesitation, Matthew stepped forward, his heart pounding as he made his way through the sea of guests. The music faded into the background, the laughter becoming a distant echo as he approached Ryan, who was oblivious to the impending disruption. With each step, Matthew felt a rush of adrenaline, an intoxicating mix of fear and excitement propelling him forward. "Ryan!" Matthew called out, his voice slicing through the atmosphere. The crowd fell silent, eyes widening as they turned to see the unfolding drama. Ryan's confident demeanor faltered for a moment as he turned to face Matthew, confusion etched across his features. "What's going on?" Ryan asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. But Matthew could see the underlying tension in his stance, the recognition that something was amiss. "It's time we have a little chat," Matthew replied, his tone steady and cold. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, a mix of curiosity and shock swirling in the air. Matthew's heart raced as he realized the magnitude of the moment. The culmination of his revenge was about to unfold in front of a captivated audience. Before Ryan could respond, Matthew continued, his voice rising above the whispers. "You think you can just waltz around, flaunting your success while you betray your wife and mine?" The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap, and gasps rippled through the crowd. The tension escalated, and Matthew could see the realization dawning on Ryan's face. "Matthew, this isn't the time or place for this," Ryan stammered, attempting to regain control of the situation. But Matthew pressed on, fueled by a mix of anger and desperation. He could see Samantha lingering at the edge of the crowd, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. "This is exactly the time and place," Matthew retorted, his voice unwavering. "You've been manipulating both our lives, thinking you could get away with it. But now, it's all coming to light." The weight of his words struck a chord, and the audience shifted uneasily, their attention rapt as they watched the confrontation unfold. Samantha pushed her way through the crowd, panic evident in her eyes as she approached. "Matthew, stop. What are you doing?" she pleaded, her voice laced with urgency. But her words fell on deaf ears. Matthew was determined to see this through. "Stop?" Matthew echoed, incredulous. "How can I stop when you've both betrayed everything we built?" The emotional weight of the moment threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to remain composed, channeling his pain into strength. He couldn't back down now. As the crowd watched in stunned silence, Matthew continued, his voice steady. "You think your little affair would remain a secret? You've disrespected not just our marriage but your own. You think you can walk away unscathed?" Each word was laced with fury, the pent-up frustration of weeks of doubt and betrayal spilling forth. Ryan's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted, his voice rising in a desperate attempt to regain control. But Matthew stood firm, unwilling to let Ryan deflect the truth. "No, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Matthew countered, his tone unwavering. "I've seen the messages, the affection you both shared. I've watched as my marriage crumbled under the weight of your deceit." The crowd shifted again, whispers rippling through them as they processed the revelations. Samantha's face turned pale, her hands trembling as she realized the depth of Matthew's knowledge. "Matthew, please," she implored, her voice cracking. "You don't understand." But her pleas fell flat against the tide of emotions surging within him. "I understand more than you think," Matthew replied, his gaze unwavering. "I've been watching you both, and it ends tonight. You will face the consequences of your actions." The conviction in his voice resonated with the crowd, their attention fixed on the dramatic confrontation unfolding before them. Before the situation could escalate further, the unmistakable sound of sirens grew louder outside. The tension reached a breaking point as law enforcement entered the venue, their uniforms stark against the elegance of the gala. The crowd erupted into chaos, gasps echoing as they processed the unexpected turn of events. "Matthew!" Samantha called out, her voice laced with desperation. "What have you done?" The fear in her eyes was palpable, and Matthew felt a mixture of satisfaction and dread at the unfolding scene. He had orchestrated this moment, yet the reality of it was overwhelming. "Just delivering some long overdue justice," he replied, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. The officers approached Ryan, who stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "Ryan Mitchell, you're under arrest for financial fraud," one of the officers announced, his tone authoritative as he moved toward Ryan. The crowd gasped, disbelief etched across their faces as they processed the news. Matthew's heart raced, the moment had finally arrived. Ryan's expression shifted to one of defiance as he attempted to argue. "This is ridiculous. You can't do this." But the officers remained resolute, moving to cuff him as the realization of his predicament settled in. Samantha stepped forward, panic etched on her face as she reached for Ryan's arm. "No! You can't do this. You have to listen to him." But her protests fell on deaf ears, the officers already initiating the process of escorting Ryan away. As the commotion unfolded, Matthew felt a sense of vindication wash over him. He had executed his plan flawlessly, exposing the truth in a way that left no room for denial. The weight of the betrayal had finally been lifted, and he stood at the center of the storm, watching as everything unraveled. The crowd watched in stunned silence, the glimmer of the gala now overshadowed by the chaos of revelation. Matthew felt a mix of emotions surging through him, anger, pain, but also a strange sense of relief. The confrontation had been cathartic, a necessary step toward closure. As Ryan was led away, Matthew turned to Samantha, who stood there, her face a mixture of disbelief and despair. "Matthew, I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. But Matthew knew there was no going back. The foundation of their marriage had been shattered, and he couldn't pretend otherwise. "It doesn't matter anymore, Samantha. The truth is out. We can't fix what's broken." The weight of the night hung heavily in the air as the realization settled between them. Their lives had irrevocably changed, the world they had built together crumbling in the aftermath of betrayal. The gala had become a turning point, a moment that would define their futures in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind of chaos, shockwaves radiating through the crowd as they processed the unexpected turn of events. Matthew stood amidst the remnants of the night, watching as Ryan was led away in handcuffs. The thrill of victory he had anticipated was quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of emptiness. As the realization of what had transpired settled over him, Matthew felt a heavy weight in his chest. The cheers and laughter that had filled the venue just moments before now felt like echoes of a distant memory, replaced by whispers of disbelief and concern. He turned away from the scene, the noise of the crowd fading into a muffled background as he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool night air hit his face, providing a stark contrast to the suffocating tension that had engulfed the gala. Matthew leaned against a wall, trying to catch his breath, his mind racing with thoughts of everything that had transpired. He had sought revenge, a chance to expose the betrayal, but now that it was done, he felt unmoored. In the distance, he saw Samantha emerge from the building, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked lost, her usual confidence stripped away, revealing the vulnerable woman underneath. As she approached, the weight of the moment settled heavily on both of them. Matthew's heart sank. He had wanted to confront her, to lay bare the truth of her actions, but seeing her like this stirred a deep conflict within him. "Matthew," Samantha said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "What just happened? I can't believe this. I didn't think it would come to this." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, the emotional fallout of the evening crashing over her like a tidal wave. Matthew struggled to find the words. "It's over, Samantha. The truth is out, and we can't go back." The finality of his statement hung in the air, thick with the weight of reality. The life they had built together felt fragile, like a house of cards that had been swept away in a storm. "But you didn't have to do this," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "We could have worked things out. I never meant for it to get this far." The anguish in her tone pulled at Matthew's heartstrings, a reminder of the love they once shared, now tainted by betrayal. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as conflicting emotions swirled within him. "What you and Ryan did, it shattered everything. I had to do something." The hurt in his voice was undeniable, and he could feel the tears stinging his eyes as he recalled the intimacy they had once shared. The laughter, the warmth, the trust, now all reduced to ashes. Samantha stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Please, just listen. I was confused. I didn't think it would go this far. I never wanted to hurt you." Her voice cracked, and Matthew could see the turmoil etched across her face, the regret palpable. "It's too late for that, Samantha," he replied, his tone firm but laced with pain. "You made your choice. You chose him." The words felt heavy on his tongue, each one a reminder of the betrayal that had fractured their marriage. He wanted to be angry, to let the rage consume him, but the sadness wrapped around his heart like a vice. As they stood there, the weight of the evening pressing down on them, Matthew could see the flicker of vulnerability in Samantha's eyes. She was struggling to find her footing, caught between the love she once felt and the guilt that now consumed her. "I never wanted this to end like this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Neither did I," Matthew replied, feeling the cracks in his resolve deepening. "But you have to understand that trust is something you can't take back. You broke it." The truth hung between them, a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. The night continued to unfold around them, sirens blaring in the distance as the reality of the gala sank deeper into their souls. Matthew felt as if he was living in a dream, the world around him spinning out of control. The laughter and chatter of guests now felt like a haunting melody, reminding him of everything he had lost. Samantha's eyes filled with tears as she searched for the right words. "I made a terrible mistake. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep everything separate, but I was wrong." Her voice was a mixture of regret and sorrow, and Matthew felt a pang of sympathy for the woman he once loved so fiercely. "I don't know how to move past this," he admitted, feeling the vulnerability in his own voice. The emotional fallout had left him shattered, and he couldn't pretend otherwise. He had fought hard for clarity, but the reality of their situation felt insurmountable. "Maybe we can find a way to heal," she suggested, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." The sincerity in her tone caught Matthew off guard, stirring a flicker of hope buried beneath the layers of betrayal and pain. But as he looked into her eyes, the memories of their shared life flashed before him, moments of happiness intertwined with the raw wound of betrayal. "I don't know if that's possible," he replied, his heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty. "You've changed everything." The silence that followed was deafening, each second stretching into eternity. Matthew's mind raced as he weighed his options, trying to envision a future without the love that had once defined him. Could they truly rebuild what had been shattered? Or were they destined to become strangers, bound only by the pain of their shared history? Samantha took a step back, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice breaking. "But I understand if you can't forgive me. I don't deserve your trust." The honesty in her admission cut deep, and Matthew felt the tears threatening to spill over as he wrestled with the emotional fallout of the night. "I need time," he finally replied, feeling the truth settle in his heart. "Time to figure out what I want, what we want." The acknowledgement felt freeing yet terrifying, a step into the unknown that would require both of them to confront the reality of their situation. Samantha nodded slowly, the pain etched across her face a reflection of his own turmoil. "I'll give you the space you need. I hope one day you can forgive me." Her words hung in the air, a desperate plea for redemption that resonated deep within Matthew's soul. As they stood in the shadow of their shattered lives, the weight of the night pressed down on them like a heavy shroud. The world around them felt distant, the chaos of the gala fading into a haunting memory. Matthew knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he also understood that healing would require them both to confront their truths. With a heavy heart, he turned away, knowing that the journey of healing would not come easily. The emotional fallout of betrayal would linger long after the evening ended, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover who they were amidst the ruins of their past. And as he walked away, he took a deep breath, determined to forge a new path, even if it meant facing the painful truth of their shattered love. The days that followed the gala were filled with an uncomfortable silence, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded that night. Matthew found himself navigating a landscape of emotions, the remnants of betrayal and heartbreak still raw and fresh. He had distanced himself from Samantha, allowing the weight of their situation to settle. Yet, the inevitability of a final confrontation loomed over him like a dark cloud. It was on a rainy afternoon when the call came. Samantha wanted to meet. Her voice trembled as she spoke, a mixture of vulnerability and determination that tugged at Matthew's heart. He agreed, knowing that they could no longer avoid the inevitable conversation that would determine the future of their relationship. The cafe they chose was quiet, the soothing sound of rain pattering against the window creating a somber backdrop. As Matthew entered, he spotted Samantha sitting at a corner table, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. She looked smaller than he remembered, the weight of their circumstances pressing down on her. Taking a seat across from her, Matthew felt a rush of emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of lingering affection. He had spent countless hours replaying their last confrontation in his mind, searching for the right words to express the turmoil within him. But now, as he faced her, the words felt elusive. "Thank you for coming," Samantha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know things are complicated, but I needed to see you." Matthew nodded, struggling to find his voice. "We need to talk about everything that happened." The gravity of his words hung in the air, and he could see the tension ripple through her. "I know," she replied, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I've spent so much time thinking about what I did, and I can't express how sorry I am. I never wanted to hurt you." The sincerity in her tone resonated within him, but the pain of her betrayal was still a stark reminder of the fracture in their relationship. "It's not just about being sorry, Samantha," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "You broke my trust. You let someone else into our lives." The truth of his words felt heavy, each syllable a reminder of the heartbreak that had followed her choices. "I understand," she replied, her voice trembling. "But please, let me explain. I was lost. I thought I could find something I was missing, and I didn't realize how deeply I would hurt you." Her honesty struck a chord, and for a moment, Matthew could see the anguish etched across her face. "But you did hurt me," he replied, feeling the pain well up inside him. "You let Ryan come between us. I never thought I would have to face this. I believed we were stronger than that." Each word was a release of the pent-up frustration and hurt, a cathartic expression of everything he had been holding back. "I thought I could keep everything separate," Samantha admitted, her eyes pleading. "I thought I could fix things without losing you. But I was wrong. I see that now." The desperation in her voice resonated with Matthew, stirring a mix of sympathy and lingering anger within him. "Do you know what it was like to watch you slip away?" he continued, feeling the floodgates of emotion opening. "I tried to reach out, but you kept pushing me away. You chose to confide in him instead of me." The truth felt like a punch to the gut, and he could see the impact of his words hitting her. "I know I made terrible choices," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I want you to know that I never meant for it to go this far. I was trying to find myself, and I lost sight of what really mattered." Her vulnerability was palpable, but the scars of betrayal remained fresh in Matthew's mind. "It's hard to accept that, Samantha," he said, his voice filled with pain. "You shattered the foundation of our marriage. How can we rebuild from this?" The question hung in the air, a stark reminder of the enormity of their situation. Samantha reached across the table, her hand trembling as she sought his. "I want to try, Matthew. I want to rebuild. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." The sincerity in her eyes was undeniable, but the reality of their situation loomed large. "Rebuilding trust takes time," he replied, pulling his hand away. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you. What you did was a choice, not a mistake. It's going to take more than words to fix this." The gravity of his statement weighed heavily on both of them, the reality of their fractured relationship sinking in. "I understand," she said softly, her voice laced with defeat. "I don't expect things to go back to normal overnight. I just want the chance to prove that I can change." The vulnerability in her tone was striking, and for a brief moment, Matthew felt a flicker of hope. But the memories of betrayal held him back, anchoring him in his pain. "Change doesn't happen just because you want it to," he said, the resolve in his voice unwavering. "You need to understand the weight of your actions. It's not just about us, it's about the trust that has been broken." The truth of his words lingered in the air, a stark reminder of the path that lay ahead. "I realize that now," Samantha admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't change the past, but I want to fight for our future. I don't want to lose you." The plea in her voice stirred something within Matthew, a reminder of the love that had once bound them together. But the walls he had built around his heart felt insurmountable. "I don't know if we can ever go back to what we were," he replied, the sadness in his voice evident. "The trust is gone, and rebuilding it will take time, if it's even possible." The uncertainty of their future loomed large, casting a shadow over their conversation. "I'm willing to wait," she said, determination shining through her tears. "I just need you to believe that I can change. I need you to give me a chance." The sincerity in her eyes tugged at his heart, but the ache of betrayal lingered, a reminder of the choices that had led them to this moment. As they sat in the quiet cafe, the weight of their conversation pressed down on them like a heavy fog. Matthew struggled with the mix of emotions swirling within him: anger, sadness, and a flicker of hope. He could see the determination in Samantha's eyes, but he also felt the chasm that separated them. "I can't promise anything right now," he finally said, his voice filled with emotion. "But I'm willing to consider it. I just need time to process everything." The words felt like a fragile truce, a step toward healing amidst the chaos. Samantha nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the moment. "That's all I can ask for," she replied, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and resignation. "Thank you for being willing to talk." As they sat together in the cafe, the rain continued to fall outside, mirroring the emotional storm that had raged between them. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they had acknowledged the reality of their situation. The confrontation had opened a door to healing, a chance to rebuild the shattered remnants of their love. But as Matthew looked into Samantha's eyes, he understood that the journey would be fraught with challenges, and only time would reveal whether they could truly move forward together or if they were destined to remain strangers bound by the weight of betrayal. In the weeks following their emotional confrontation, Matthew found himself in a state of reflection and uncertainty. The gravity of their situation weighed heavily on his shoulders, and the process of moving forward felt daunting. Each day was a new challenge, a delicate balancing act between the remnants of their shared past and the fragile hope for a different future. Matthew dedicated himself to introspection, using the quiet moments of solitude to unpack his feelings. He spent hours contemplating the love he had once shared with Samantha, recalling the laughter and the dreams they had built together. Yet, with each memory, the sting of betrayal crept back in, reminding him of the painful reality that had shattered their world. Despite the turmoil within him, he felt a flicker of hope. Their conversation at the cafe had opened a door, albeit a narrow one, to the possibility of healing. Samantha's willingness to acknowledge her mistakes and express her desire to change resonated deeply with him. It was a small step, but in the wake of their tumultuous journey, it felt monumental. As days turned into weeks, Matthew established a routine that allowed him to focus on himself. He picked up hobbies he had abandoned during the tumult of their marriage, rediscovering a sense of independence that had long been overshadowed. He found solace in running, the rhythmic pounding of his feet against the pavement providing a release for his pent-up emotions. The physical exertion allowed him to clear his mind, to channel his frustrations into something constructive. During this time, he also sought the support of friends who had been with him through thick and thin. They offered a listening ear, sharing their perspectives on love, betrayal, and forgiveness. With each conversation, Matthew gained a clearer understanding of his own feelings, the complexities of trust, and the necessity of self-care. He began to see the value in addressing his pain rather than allowing it to fester in silence. Samantha, too, embarked on her own journey of self-discovery. She respected Matthew's need for space but also took proactive steps to demonstrate her commitment to change. She attended counseling sessions, determined to unravel the motivations behind her actions. Each session allowed her to confront the deeper issues that had led her to seek validation outside of their marriage. The distance between them became a double-edged sword. While it provided the necessary space for healing, it also left room for doubt. Matthew often found himself questioning whether he could ever fully trust Samantha again. The echoes of her betrayal haunted him, and he struggled with the fear of repeating the cycle of hurt. However, as the weeks passed, he noticed subtle changes in their dynamic. Samantha reached out periodically, sharing snippets of her progress, her newfound insights. Their conversations, though infrequent, were filled with genuine vulnerability and honesty. The walls that had once separated them began to crack, allowing glimpses of the connection they had once cherished. Eventually, they agreed to meet again, a tentative step toward rebuilding their relationship. The meeting took place in a serene park, the soft rustling of leaves and the distant sound of children playing creating a calming atmosphere. Matthew arrived early, his heart racing as he awaited Samantha's arrival. When she approached, he noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor. Her posture was more confident, her smile more genuine. They exchanged pleasantries, both feeling the weight of their shared history but also the potential for a new beginning. "I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed," Samantha said, her voice steady. "I know it's going to take time, but I'm committed to proving that I can earn back your trust." There was a sincerity in her words that resonated with Matthew, igniting a flicker of hope within him. "I want to believe that," he replied, feeling a mixture of apprehension and optimism. "But it's going to take more than just words. I need to see consistent actions that show me you're serious about changing." The reality of their situation loomed large, but he felt a sense of determination to navigate it together. As they continued their conversation, Matthew realized that he was beginning to see Samantha in a new light. She was no longer just a woman who had betrayed him, she was also a person who was actively working to confront her past mistakes. The duality of her character stirred a sense of compassion within him, but he was cautious not to let his guard down too quickly. "I know I have a long way to go," Samantha admitted, her eyes reflecting her vulnerability. "But I want to show you that I'm willing to put in the effort. I've realized how much I took for granted." Her honesty struck a chord with Matthew, and he felt the walls around his heart begin to shift. As they sat together in the park, they shared stories of their individual journeys, Matthew's rediscovery of hobbies and friendships, and Samantha's insights from her counseling sessions. Each revelation brought them closer together, weaving a tapestry of understanding that had been missing for so long. With each meeting, they began to forge a new connection, one built on honesty and shared experiences rather than the facade of perfection. Matthew found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, sharing his fears and uncertainties. Samantha listened intently, her empathy palpable as she acknowledged the pain she had caused. However, the journey of rebuilding trust was not linear. There were moments of doubt and setbacks that threatened to unravel the progress they had made. Old insecurities bubbled to the surface, and Matthew occasionally found himself wrestling with the shadows of betrayal. During one particularly vulnerable moment, he expressed his fears to Samantha. "What if I can't fully forgive you? What if I'm always haunted by what happened?" The honesty in his voice was raw, and he could see the concern etched across Samantha's face. "I understand those fears," she replied softly. "It's natural to feel that way after everything we've been through. But I promise I will do everything in my power to show you that I'm committed to change." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord within him, and he felt a glimmer of hope amidst the uncertainty. Gradually, they began to incorporate small rituals into their relationship, shared meals, walks in the park, and open conversations about their feelings. These moments became the building blocks of a new foundation, one that embraced vulnerability and authenticity. Over time, Matthew found that he could begin to trust Samantha again, albeit cautiously. The process was slow, and he was mindful of the fragility of their situation. But with each passing day, he saw glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with, the warmth and kindness that had initially drawn him to her. As they moved forward, Matthew understood that healing would take time. They would encounter challenges and moments of doubt, but he felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead was uncharted territory, but together, they were willing to navigate the complexities of their emotions. In the midst of their healing journey, they discovered a shared resilience. They leaned on each other, drawing strength from their individual experiences as they built a new narrative together. The scars of the past would remain, but they began to see them as symbols of growth rather than reminders of pain. Matthew realized that moving forward didn't mean erasing the past, it meant learning from it. He had the opportunity to redefine their relationship, to embrace the imperfections that made them human. As they took each step together, he felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. Ultimately, they understood that the journey of rebuilding trust was not about forgetting the betrayal but about forging a new bond that acknowledged the complexities of their shared history. With each passing day, they moved closer to a future filled with possibility, a future where love could flourish amidst the scars of the past. And as Matthew walked hand in hand with Samantha, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just two people navigating the aftermath of betrayal. They were partners in healing, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Thank you for listening. See you in the next episode. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye.